Well, a warm hello. This is Dan Arth, and for the next hour, I will be reading from the Wednesday, August 19th issue of your Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. And we'll go right to the headlines. Canada gets tariff reprieve. Trump announces pause on 50% levies as deal finalized. The article is by Stephanie Taylor and Tanda McCharles. U.S. President Donald Trump says he is pausing the 50% tariffs on Canada that were set to take effect Wednesday, today, citing a pending trade deal that has yet to be finalized. Trump announced the move in a Truth Social post at 10:15 p.m., less than 2 hours before the tariffs on $28 billion worth of Canadian goods were scheduled to take effect at 12:01 a.m. Quote, I have paused the 50% tariffs against Canada that were scheduled to kick in tomorrow morning for a 3-day period based on the fact that Canada and the USA, subject to the finalization of documents, have a deal, end of quote, the president wrote. And next quote, the great Keystone XL pipeline, long ago killed by sleepy Joe Biden, may be awoken from the grave, end of quote. Prime Minister Mark Carney said in a statement late Tuesday that substantial progress has been made, although there is important work still to be done. Quote by Mark Carney, while we will continue this work, Canada remains focused on building a stronger, more independent, and more competitive economy at home. His statement did not mention the status of existing U.S. tariffs on steel, aluminum, autos, and lumber, which Canadian negotiators had identified as a key issue, nor did it address Keystone XL. A presidential action document detailing Trump's pause said that Canada had expressed a commitment to address U.S. concerns, including returning American alcohol to Canadian store shelves, dairy market access, and autos. Before trade talks collapsed last fall, Carney had proposed renewing the Keystone XL expansion project as part of an energy security pitch to Trump to ease the sectoral auto and metal tariffs. But talks were suspended when Trump was angered by Ontario anti-tariff ads that aired during the Super Bowl. In the spring, the Trump administration eased regulations governing cross-border oil and gas pipelines, including any future revival of a Keystone XL project that could follow a different route from the one blocked under the Obama and Biden administrations. Trump's post comes after Canadian negotiators had been weighing whether to accept a lower level of sectoral tariffs on Canadian autos and metals as part of an interim deal, according to three sources. Canadian negotiators had been trying to secure a deal that would avoid the new tariffs and offer some reprieve from the existing U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, autos, and lumber. In exchange, the Trump administration wanted U.S. liquor returned to provincial liquor shelves and more access to Canada's dairy market under its supply management system. As time ticked down to Wednesday's deadline, a sense of pessimism was setting in, as neither side was sending signals that a deal was near. Carney, who has long vowed he would not sign a bad deal, spoke Tuesday afternoon to Trump following an earlier call the pair had on Monday. Dominic LeBlanc, the cabinet lead on Canada-U.S. trade, and chief negotiator Janice Sherratt have also been meeting with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, along with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, including on Monday in a sit-down that lasted nearly 2 hours. In a post on X, the United States Trade Representative said the deal with Canada would include comprehensive market access for all American goods, economic security commitments, digital trade alignment, and many more important provisions that will continue to protect our market and American workers along with our Canadian partners. In Canada, industry leaders were more cautious. Quote, let's be clear, the tariff delay provides relief on both sides of the border, Canadian Chamber of Commerce President and CEO Candice Lang said in a statement. She continued, businesses may not be closing up shop with this news, but an extension doesn't bring the certainty that a signed interim deal would, Lang said, adding that this limbo state is not anyone's preferred outcome and that time was of the essence. The Ontario Chamber of Commerce echoed that sentiment. Quote, it's classic reality TV schlock, the cliffhanger. Trump loves it. Businesses hate it, said CEO Daniel Tisch of the 3-day delay. Over the weekend, Canadian officials reached out to industry stakeholders to sound them out on impacts and possible reactions to a range of tariffs on the key auto, steel, and aluminum sectors that the U.S. insists should remain in place. A source in the auto industry with knowledge of the negotiations, speaking on condition they not be identified, said what the Americans have offered is to reduce so-called Section 232 tariffs to 15%, down from the current 25%, but Washington wants to maintain tariff exemptions on U.S. content only, while Canada wants to see all content under the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement, CUSMA, exempt. The source said Canada was trying to secure as low a tariff as possible. While American and some Canadian officials have argued that an agreement that includes a lower baseline tariff would still leave Canada with a better deal than other countries, Lana Payne, the national president of Unifor, argued against such a compromise. Quote, we are not other countries, she told the Star earlier on Tuesday. She continued, we are the country that has had 40 plus years of free trade with the U.S., which has resulted in integrated supply chains. You can't compare us to Japan or South Korea or any of these other places. The UK, Europe, who have negotiated whatever tariff rate they've negotiated, because we are not the same. As the threat of a new round of American tariffs under a different law, so-called Section 338 tariffs, loomed, Canadian industry leaders cautioned Ottawa should insist on zero tariffs for goods that comply with CUSMA and insisted that there be zero tariffs on Canadian content as well as U.S. content. But a key concern expressed by 3 of the Star's sources was that the American demands, if accepted, could potentially still leave an effective tariff rate on autos made in Canada that would eat into the narrow profit margins of automaking companies and within years drive them to move production out of Canada. Quote, if that's the case, these guys will continue to make the cars that are currently on the lines right now, but they won't renew them, said one source who also spoke on condition that they not be named. And so you'll see a bunch of tough decisions over the next 1 to 5 years, like the Stellantis Brampton crisis right now. The Brampton plant was idled when Stellantis moved production of its Jeep Compass to the U.S., and Unifor says the company has, quote, informed the union of its intent to open discussions with another firm about the potential sale of the plant. A fourth source who also spoke on condition of anonymity because the briefings were strictly confidential, said Canadian officials had also discussed what level of lower metal tariffs might be acceptable to the steel and aluminum industries. And the story article does continue. If you would like to hear the entire article, please call 716-821-5555. And now we'll move on to the next story from the headlines. Toronto feels the fever. Sellout crowd greets first visit from WNBA superstar Caitlin Clark. Article is by Laban Osman. The Caitlin Clark effect is the real deal. It's been years since a basketball player received a reception quite like the one the WNBA superstar got Tuesday night in her first visit to Toronto in front of a sold-out crowd of 19,300 at Scotiabank Arena, many donning Clark jerseys. From fans standing in line for hours before tip-off to a young fan rushing to deliver a bouquet of flowers before the game, the excitement was palpable. Clark, no stranger to attention wherever she plays, didn't really know what to expect when she arrived. But when the Fever boarded the team bus and drove to the arena with fans lined up, she got an inkling. Quote, those are kind of pinch me moments, said Clark, who dropped 24 points with 3 rebounds and 7 assists in the Fever's 101-95 victory over the Tempo. Quote, those aren't moments you ever take for granted. It's cool that people are waiting 2.5 hours before. I don't know if I would ever do that. It shows just how much this one opportunity means to the people, to be able to see a player that they've probably watched on TV a lot and experience a moment that they felt through the TV screen or seen online, Clark stated. Among the Clark supporters in attendance for the game against the expansion Tempo were 2 families of 9 from Riverview, New Brunswick, with children ages 6, 8, 9, and 11 to watch the All-Star Guard. It was a gift for the kids that 41-year-old Megan Best had planned months in advance. She made sure to join the presale fan club and set aside time from her job as a high school teacher to snag the tickets when they became available. Best said, we let both families' kids know at the same time, and they cried because they were so excited to see the game. Best calls Clark a positive role model for her kids and says their love of basketball has grown because of her. She said, Clark seems to always stay on the positive no matter what's going on. And it's someone for the kids to look up to because she is able to persevere and always gets through all the hardships, including several injuries, that she's gone through in the league. Best's family sat in section 107 across from the Fever bench. Her kids made Clark signs. The other New Brunswick group sat in the upper bowl, but the kids from both families swapped seats throughout the game to share the closer view. The pregame fanfare for Clark at least matched support for the Tempo. Many fans wore jerseys from Clark's collegiate days at Iowa, as well as every Fever color combination. Quote, people came up to us and were like, we love the Tempo and we're so excited for the game tomorrow. They maybe said they would be cheering for us this game, Clark said about one interaction with fans in the city. Heading into Tuesday night, Clark was averaging a career-high 22 points, 3.9 rebounds, and 8.3 assists in her third WNBA season. She was named Eastern Conference Player of the Week after scoring 20-plus points in 5 straight games for the 4th place Indiana. Before their Scotiabank Arena debut, Clark and teammates also tried some of Canada's iconic snacks, such as ketchup and all-dressed potato chips, coffee crisp bars, and gummy bears. Quote, who is eating these? Clark said, unimpressed in a social media video after trying ketchup chips. The fanfare came as no surprise to Tempo head coach Sandy Brondello, who coached Clark at last year's WNBA All-Star Weekend. Quote, I actually have some compassion and empathy for Caitlin because how hard that's been being in her shoes, Brondello said. There's so much expectation on them, but she's just handled herself brilliantly. Clark's impact on the WNBA is not lost on her. It is a point of pride. She said, I hope when I'm done playing one day, that's what people remember the most about me is the way I've been able to unite people to cheer on basketball and love a game. And we'll go back to the front page. Tavares testifies in fight over $8 million tax bill. Maple Leafs case could have impact on other Canadian teams trying to lure players from U.S. Article is by Jennifer Pagliaro. As contract negotiations were heating up between the Maple Leafs and John Tavares in 2018, the Rising Star called Toronto general manager Kyle Dubas directly. Without agents involved, Tavares made a final play for the deal he felt he deserved. Quote, if you really want me, why can't we agree on $11 million? The then 27-year-old asked. Would an $11 million annual average salary over a 7-year deal make him a Maple Leaf? Dubas replied. Simply, Tavares said, yes. The rest, as Leafs fans know, is history. the Oakville native signed a contract worth $77 million US dollars to come home and play for Toronto, leaving New York and the Islanders, where he started his professional career. He would soon become the Leafs captain. If Tavares, now an alternate captain, ever expected he'd be detailing those behind-the-scenes negotiations in a seventh-floor courtroom in federal tax court, the typically even-keeled Star didn't let it show on Tuesday. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. So back to this story. He was testifying because the Canada Revenue Agency has since said he must pay a bill of around $8 million Canadian on the deal, in a case that could impact how Canadian teams attract top players currently based in the United States. Quote, "I would like to be in my cottage today preparing for the season and spending time with my family," Tavares told reporters with a slight smile outside a Queen Street West courtroom. "But it is what it is," he said. "You deal with whatever comes your way. That's part of life, right?" Tavares took the stand in a gray and blue plaid suit on Tuesday and in a clear voice said, "professional hockey player," when asked to state his occupation. The core issue in Tavares' appeal is whether the bonus of $15.25 million US dollars that Tavares received in his first year with the Leafs was actually a signing bonus he was paid while still a U.S. resident, taxable at a lesser rate under the Canada-U.S. tax treaty, or salary to be taxed at Canadian rates. The question has broad implications because the structure of Tavares' deal is not unusual. The Leafs and other Canadian teams have used signing bonuses to attract players to join from U.S. states where tax rates are often much lower. A player may be more likely to sign if they get a chunk of cash up front, but taxed at U.S. rates. Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, which owns the Leafs, withheld 15% of the bonus on Tavares' behalf for U.S. tax purposes. His notice of appeal filed with the court says, as he was still considered a United States person under U.S. tax law at the time he signed his Leafs contract, something federal lawyers initially contested but relented on this summer. In 2022, the CRA reassessed the hockey player's tax filings and claimed he owed $6.85 million plus $1.2 million in interest because it was not, federal lawyers said in the response to the appeal, properly claimed as taxable income in Canada. On the stand, Tavares detailed his early career as an amateur player who by age 18 was drafted first overall to the New York Islanders. By his fourth season, he was made captain, playing 6 times on NHL All-Star teams and twice winning gold for Team Canada at the Olympics. As June 2018 approached and his contract with the Islanders was set to expire, Tavares told the court he owed it to himself to see what his options were. Quote, "I was in a position to earn a lucrative contract," he said. Though he hadn't yet decided to leave the Islanders, he told his agent he would entertain other offers. He recalled that as soon as the period when other teams can't approach players began, within 60 seconds he received a text and video message from Leafs general manager Dubas about why Toronto was the right fit. It was that pursuit from Toronto that eventually won him over. He testified, and after 2 meetings with team officials and his then fiancée, now wife, he told his agent to get the deal done. Quote, "It was really hard to disconnect from New York. Toronto really stood out with the aggressive nature they had in wanting to sign me, and the fit really made a lot of sense." After the hearing, Tavares' lawyer, KPMG senior partner Justin Kutyan, said the key problem to resolve is whether Canada or the U.S. is owed the bulk of the tax on the player's signing bonus. "It's actually about who gets the tax," he said. "Obviously, the Minister of National Revenue thinks it's Canada's right to tax it, so we're here to guide the court in the right direction." The implications of the court's decision will be significant for teams' ability to attract top talent, Kutnian said. Tavares told reporters he doesn't regret his decision to come to Toronto, even knowing what he does now about his legal battle with the CRA. Quote, I wasn't counting every last penny, but obviously I wanted to maximize my opportunity along with where I was going to live as I was looking to start a family, the father of 3 said. Quote, and obviously trying to have the best career possible and be as successful as you can be. When it comes to whether his case will set a precedent for teams attracting players, he said there are parts of the game and the business side of hockey that are out of your control. Quote, obviously being here in Toronto, you want to continue to highlight what makes it special here, what makes it special to come here and play here, he said. Quote, you just hope everything can work out in my favor, and then obviously in the good of all players, the league, the teams, and whatnot. End of article. Now moving over to international news. Envoy says Canada pivotal to peace. Article by Dylan Robertson. The new Palestinian ambassador to Ottawa says Canada's recognition of the state of Palestine has been pivotal for her people and for upholding international law. But she says Canada must do more to end Israel's occupation. Quote, my message to Canadians is that they do have a role in giving hope to the Palestinian people. Fida Abdelhadi told the Canadian press, there needs to be more consistency and coherence in Canadian policy vis-a-vis Palestine and Israel, she said Monday in her first feature interview with mainstream media since arriving in Ottawa earlier this summer. Abdelhadi's predecessor finished her posting last fall, just as Prime Minister Mark Carney officially recognized the state of Palestine nearly a year ago. Carney said he took the move to preserve the possibility of a two-state solution in which Israel and a Palestinian country can safely exist, a prospect Ottawa says has been undermined by the Israeli government and Palestinian militants such as Hamas, which Canada deems a terrorist group. Since then, a ceasefire deal in Gaza has marginally lowered the daily violence between Israel and Hamas militants and pulled the territory out of an official famine declaration. The United Nations says there is still a ghastly humanitarian situation, particularly for children, while Israel is taking over a growing amount of the territory. In that time, the UN says it's been alarmed at a sharp uptick in extremist Israeli settler violence in the West Bank, with deadly clashes and settlers siphoning off critical water sources. Israel has enacted a death penalty that Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand warned in March systematically targets Palestinians. The Liberals have also sanctioned some of the most violent settlers. Abdelhadi spoke Monday shortly after it emerged that Israel's National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir publicly advocated for killing 30 to 40 Palestinians in Gaza each night. Quote, I come to Canada at perhaps the darkest chapter in the history of the Palestinian people, but I come into Canada also very hopeful, she said. Abdelhadi sees that hope in having Canadians view various forms of violence and oppression taking place in the Middle East as being connected. Quote, this is ongoing. It is comprehensive and it is systematic, she said. Since 1967, Israel has controlled virtually all Palestinian territory, with Israel arguing occupation and restrictions on borders are required to respond to real security threats. Canada and most countries deem the occupation of the West Bank and policies in Gaza to violate international law. Hamas attacked Israel in 2023 when militants killed 1,200 people and filmed themselves committing what Human Rights Watch deems to be war crimes. Israel has since killed tens of thousands of civilians in Gaza through wide-scale bombing and shooting, and ramped up restrictions and raids in the West Bank while emboldening armed settlers. Al-Hadi said, the logical end result of Israeli policies is to make life for Palestinians so wretched that they are forced to leave. She pointed to multiple Israeli government statements about resettling Palestinians and making their land into Israeli territory. Quote, it's a system of occupation. It's the system of apartheid. It's a system of genocide, she said. She said Canada has pushed back on that by committing to a Palestinian state and helping to build institutions for when her people govern themselves. Quote, Canada is not submitting to the Israeli dictate of no Palestinian state and of maligning the Palestinian government with its attack on the Palestinian Authority and any other official Palestinian institution. Abdel Hadi said of Carney's recognition, his decision as regards Palestine, we believe, was pivotal. Globally, it was very meaningful. But she said Canada needs to impose consequences on Israel, such as suspending trade agreements that are being used to import goods from occupied Palestinian territory, quote, stolen goods, as she puts it, and military exports that are used against Palestinians. Ottawa has insisted it only exports defensive arms to Israel, such as circuit boards for the Iron Dome missile defense system, saying at first it had banned lethal goods under a parliamentary motion that passed in March 2024. The Liberals later switched to saying the ban exempted items used to defend civilians. Groups like Project Plowshares say the language is misleading and that Canadian components are ending up in arms used against Palestinians, possibly due to Canadian exemptions on arms controls for goods sent through the U.S. Abdel Hadi said the Israeli government will keep emboldening West Bank settlers if it doesn't face sanctions against Israel as a whole and not just select individuals. This entire Israeli occupation regime, governmental, military, and the settler militias, it's one and the same, she said. It funds, it enables, it facilitates, it protects these settlers. Al-Hadi's term in Ottawa follows decades of work representing the Palestinian Authority at the United Nations, where she says American vetoes have undermined the ability to resolve and prevent conflict. And our next international story, Tehran says Trump in straight, quote, delusion. Article by Sami Magdai. U.S. President Donald Trump said Tuesday the U.S. has no talks planned with Iran, but insisted the Strait of Hormuz remains, quote, open and operating despite limited traffic and a reported strike on a ship exiting the waterway. Earlier this week, Trump also threatened to bomb Oman as the country sought a deal with Iran to manage shipping traffic through the strait. Two regional officials said Tuesday, a day after Trump reportedly leveled the threat if Oman, quote, gets in the way. Iran says the waterway will not be reopened until the U.S. meets its conditions. As talks between Iran and Oman continue, a projectile hit a ship in the strait, and Iran-backed Houthi rebels claim they fired drones at an oil refinery in Saudi Arabia. The report of the ship being hit was from the British military's maritime monitoring agency. As Oman and Iran say they are nearing a deal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, Trump said on social media that the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports remains, quote, in full force and effect, but added all water mines are removed and that other marine traffic was free to pass. Trump posted a map depicting the strait as U.S. territory. Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi appeared to respond to Trump's post, quote, just as Trump correctly wrote the name of the eternal Persian Gulf, soon his delusion regarding the Strait of Hormuz will either be corrected or we will correct the delusions of this deluded man, he wrote on X. The Trump administration has told Oman It opposes parts of the yet-to-be-announced deal, according to officials briefed on the U.S. position. Those include joint Iranian and Omani management of the passage's exit route and the collection of voluntary fees from vessels, even if the money is used for security and maritime environmental protection. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The officials spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to talk to journalists. The White House on Tuesday referred to Trump's remarks in the Oval Office and declined to comment further about Oman. Trump's comment on Monday was not the first time he has threatened Oman. In May, he told reporters during a cabinet meeting that Oman, quote, will behave just like everybody else or we will have to blow them up. Iran reiterated Tuesday that Tehran plans to maintain its grip on shipping traffic until Washington meets its conditions. Quote, until the United States fulfills its commitments under the agreement, including lifting the blockade, releasing frozen assets, lifting oil sanctions, ending threats and military operations on all fronts, and implementing the other conditions to which it committed, the Strait of Hormuz will not reopen, said Mohammad Baghir Khalibaf, Iran's parliamentary speaker and negotiator in previous talks with the U.S. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry said Tuesday that the Iranian-Omani deal could pave the way for Washington and Tehran to return to negotiations for a comprehensive and permanent deal that addresses all concerns and enhances regional security and stability. The statement came after a meeting between Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati and Omani counterpart Badr al-Basadi, but it did not address Trump's latest threat against Oman. End of article. And on to our next international story. Drone blitz on Moscow ramped up. Russian missiles killed 10 in rural Ukraine. Zelensky vows to retaliate. Article is by Hanna Ararova and Barry Hatton. Ukrainian forces launched one of their biggest drone attacks on Russia since Moscow's invasion over 4 years ago, firing almost 800 drones only 2 days after a similar salvo, officials said Tuesday. Meanwhile, a Russian strike on a village in Ukraine's Kharkiv region killed at least 10 people and wounded 17 others as the barrage demolished homes, officials said. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called it a, quote, brutal attack that damaged 10 homes, a cafe, a post office, a store, and at least 7 vehicles. Quote, we will definitely respond to this Russian strike, he said on social media. The countries are locked in an escalating duel of long-range aerial strikes, fighting on the roughly 1,250-kilometer front line in eastern and southern Ukraine is restricted by large numbers of drones and ground robots threatening troop movements, and neither side is making significant battlefield progress, analysts said. In the past year, Ukraine has devised and deployed domestically produced long-range drones for strikes deep inside Russia. Its drone technology has impressed governments and defense manufacturers around the world. Officials in Kiev aim to make the Russian public feel the war's consequence and pressure Russian President Vladimir Putin into negotiating a peace settlement. Quote, Putin continues to drag out the war instead of accepting Ukraine's realistic ceasefire proposals and ending the bloodshed, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha said in a post on X. Russian air defenses overnight intercepted 791 Ukrainian drones over a number of regions, as well as annexed Crimea and the Black and the Azov Seas, the defense ministry in Moscow said, in what was the second largest drone attack since January 2025, according to an Associated Press tally. More than 600 Ukrainian drones flew toward the Moscow region, where 180 were shot down, Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin said without elaborating. Officials reported no deaths or major damage. Ukraine has increasingly launched swarms of hundreds of drones to try to overwhelm Russian air defenses. In the region that surrounds the capital, 3 people were wounded, Governor Andrei Vorobyov said. 3 people were also wounded in the adjacent Ryazan region, where 3 private houses were damaged, Governor Pavel Malkov said. Coverage of the attack in state and Kremlin-backed Russian media was mostly muted, as is often the case. Russia's main TV channels, state-run Russia 1 and Channel 1, did not mention the attack at all in their morning news bulletins. Russian state news agency RIA Novosti featured it among the main news on its homepage, describing it as, quote, one of the most large-scale attacks on Moscow since the beginning of the summer, end of article. All right, let's move over to the sports section. Venus Williams receives U.S. Open singles wild card. Article is by Brian Mahoney, New York. Venus Williams was given a singles wild card for the U.S. Open on Tuesday, and the season's final Grand Slam tournament is keeping one on hold, perhaps in case her sister, Serena, wants it. Sloane Stephens, the 2017 U.S. Open champion, was one of 6 other women to receive wild cards, with one still to be announced. That almost certainly would go to Serena Williams if she decides she wants to return at age 44. Venus Williams received a wild card last year, returning for the first time since 2023 to the tournament she has won twice. The 46-year-old became the event's oldest entrant in singles since Renee Richards played at 47 back in 1981, according to the International Tennis Federation. She has continued to play singles matches, and this week joined Serena for their first doubles tournament together since the 2022 U.S. Open. They lost Monday at the Cincinnati Open in a tiebreaker against Marta Kostyuk and Peyton Stearns. The sisters planned to play at Wimbledon but withdrew after Serena suffered a knee injury in her first singles match since the 2022 U.S. Open. She indicated afterward that she hoped to keep competing if healthy. Headlining the wildcard recipients on the men's side were 39-year-old Gael Monfils, set to play his final Grand Slam tournament before retiring, and Alexei Popyrin, who upset Novak Djokovic in 2024 on the way to the 4th round. One men's wildcard spot also remains unfilled. End of article. And our next sports article, upswing in confidence. Canadian teen Huang heads into country's LPGA Tour event on a high. Article is by Donna Spencer. Anna Hang's CPKC Women's Open last year was a turning point in her golf career. She missed the cut in Mississauga as a 16-year-old. Quote, I wasn't really sure what I was doing with my life, to be honest. Vancouver's Huang recalled, I wasn't playing very well at that time. I'd missed 4 or 5 cuts in a row. While Canadian Brooke Henderson charged to victory, Huang headed to the putting green with caddy and coach Sean Burke. Quote, after I missed the cut, he spent the weekend just working on my putting a lot, Huang said. We also worked on speed things, alignment. I definitely would say that with all of the practice and help I got in Mississauga, that really affected what happened afterwards, which was really good. End of quote. Within the month, she had won back-to-back tournaments on the Ladies European Tour. The Canadian teenager won again in May in Morocco, but a victory in the PIF London Championship, English star Charlie Hull's home tournament on August 9th, set the women's golf world abuzz. At 17 years, 9 months, and 10 days, Huang became the youngest golfer to win 4 Euro Tour titles, breaking the record set by New Zealand's Lydia Ko at age 18. Now the Canadian returns to the CPKC Women's Open, which starts Thursday, in a different headspace. I'm definitely a lot more confident in my game, she said. Last year when I played the Canadian Open, I had 0 wins under my belt, and I was a rookie. This year, second year on the tour, I've played 6 majors now, played many LPGA events. I just have a lot more experience. That's just going to be a really big help. End of quote. The 2.75 million US tournament returns to Edmonton's Royal Mayfair Golf Club, where Ko won as an amateur in 2013 for her where Ko won as an amateur in 2013 for her second straight Canadian title. Huang is part of a wave of teenage talent in Canada that includes Calgary's Aphrodite Deng, who at 15 was the low amateur in last year's event in Mississauga, tying for 20th at 4 under par. That was the best finish by a non-pro since Ko's 2013 victory. Quote, last year did kind of raise my expectations, knowing that I can perform and compete against the best in the world, Dang said. I definitely feel more confident and more comfortable out there, knowing what to expect and playing in front of all the crowds again. Dang, who is committed to Stanford University, was the first Canadian to win the U.S. Girls Junior Championship in 2025. She also defended her title in the Mizuho Americas Open in May and tied for 17th in the U.S. Women's Open in June. Both Huang and Dang earned sponsor exemptions in Edmonton, as did 16-year-old Clary Lynn of Langley, British Columbia, who made it back-to-back wins for Canadians at the U.S. Girls Junior Championships this year. She is also committed to Stanford. Quote, this group is doing things that have not been done before, like winning U.S. Juniors and getting into U.S. Opens at a young age, said Golf Canada's next-gen coach Jeff McDonald. I'm getting asked a lot of questions from college coaches and people in general. What is going on in Canada right now? Huang chose the pro path early. She said, I never really liked school to begin with. That meant starting on the European Tour with the LPGA, requiring golfers to be 18 or turning 18 for membership. Loneliness and on-course struggles made her question the decision to turn pro last year. She said, when I played a little bit better and started to gain a little bit more confidence and made a few more friends, everything just came back together, which helped me get my first win on tour. End of quote. Upon arrival in Alberta's capital less than 48 hours after the London victory, Huang was surprised by the reception at a local club where she went to practice. Quote, I got recognized a lot, and it was really cool, she said. They were telling me they watched the final round on TV. I'm really glad they were able to see that. End of story. All right, moving over to the NFL. Bieniemy's recovering wife okays his return. Article is from the Associated Press. Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy joked Tuesday that he had the blessing of his wife Maya to return to the team after she was shot at their Virginia home because, well, quote, I know I was driving her and a bunch of my family members crazy in the house. Maya was shot the evening of July 26th, and the couple's 27-year-old son, Elijah, was arrested. Eric left the Chiefs right away to help his family through the crisis and returned to camp last week ahead of a preseason loss to the Rams. Quote, first and foremost, yes, she's on a great road to recovery, said Bieniemy, speaking to reporters for the first time since she was rushed to the hospital with multiple wounds. Quote, it is one of the main reasons that I am back here because of her recovery. She's truly a soldier. She's also a saint, and it's been incredible to watch. End of quote. Bieniemy was never far from camp, even while he was back home in Ashburn, Virginia. He watched live streams of practices from Missouri Western State University and was often conferenced into team meetings before and after the workouts. At one point, he called Chiefs general manager Brett Veach, who he knew was seated beside coach Andy Reid, and told him to give Big Red the phone. Bieniemy proceeded to remind Reid to get on one of his players for a seemingly minor coaching point. Quote, I was yelling at the screen, yelling at players, yelling at coaches. What the hell are we doing? I'm yelling at myself. Why would you put that play in? Bieniemy said, smiling. At the end of the day, I was making sure I was keeping up with what was going on. At the same time, he was driving Maya and the rest of the family crazy. Quote, so she was like, you have my blessing to leave, Eric said. So it was time to get back to work. Elijah Bieniemy has been charged with malicious wounding, use of a firearm in commission of a felony, and discharge of a firearm inside a dwelling. His court appearances remain delayed pending a mental health evaluation. End of story. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from your Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. All right, we'll move over to the business section. Trump's 50% tariffs a threat to survival. Some business owners wonder if they'll manage under new U.S. levies. Article by Ryan Tumulty and Estella Wren. Matt Johnston has spent the better part of the last 30 days preparing for U.S. President Donald Trump's latest tariff threat. Johnston, the CEO of Collective Arts Brewing in Hamilton, said the beer he ships to 10 U.S. states makes up about 20% of his business. If Trump follows through on his threats starting Wednesday, those same lagers and ales will face a 50% tariff, something Johnston said he simply cannot manage. Quote, it would just essentially make it not viable to sell those products made in Canada down to the U.S. There's no way to absorb or pass on those cost increases, end of quote. When Trump announced the tariff in July, they were a direct response to the decision from most provincial liquor control boards to pull American products from their shelves. The White House argued that was discriminatory and had cost U.S. firms $600 million in U.S. dollars in lost sales. Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke directly with Trump on Monday, but there were no deals as of Tuesday afternoon. Even with the potential hit coming to his business, Johnston doesn't think the government should cave to Trump's demands. Quote, you don't win against a bully by backing down and providing constant concessions because they'll just keep coming back looking for more, he said. Johnston said his U.S. customers have wanted to work with him, and Collective Arts sent product to the U.S. in advance, but beer has a shelf life, and they can only ship so much before tariffs kick in. Johnston said they have also looked at brewing some of their beer at facilities in the U.S., which is not something they want to do, but tariffs may give them little choice. Quote, at this point, with a 50% tariff, you either walk away from a business you spent years establishing, or you look at some short-term production while all the trade negotiations go on, he said. Collective Arts also makes non-alcoholic beverages, including wellness products and energy drinks, a market Johnston hopes to expand in Canada and internationally. Right now, he believes the company can pivot to new markets and avoid layoffs. Quote, there's 125 plus of us, and we're stubborn, and we will continue to look for different avenues to grow, end of quote. He said he is hopeful Canadians will vote with their wallets and help companies like his weather the storm. All right, our next business article. OpenAI launches ChatGPT for teens. Company says new version will have stronger protections as experts sound alarm over chatbots. Article is by Barbara Ortute. OpenAI is launching a version of ChatGPT designed for teenagers, the first generation to grow up with artificial intelligence, who are already using it for schoolwork, questions about daily life, and even companionship. The San Francisco-based company says ChatGPT for teens, which launched on Tuesday, is tailored for kids aged 13 to 17 with stronger protections including content restrictions around things like suicide, self-harm, and romantic or sexual chats. It also provides homework and study support designed to help students learn rather than spit out answers in school essays. The idea is to guide teens toward healthy AI use in an age-appropriate environment, the company said. Quote, "We want to treat teens like teens, which means that we have to make sure that we're showing up with the right developmental stage when we're not either talking down to them or treating them like kids, but we're also making sure that they're not exposed to material that they shouldn't be exposed to," said Ann O'Leary, Vice President of Global Policy at OpenAI. Parents, educators, and child development experts have been sounding alarms over children's use of AI chatbots, which have been blamed for facilitating cheating on schoolwork and even suicide. And while even adults can fall victim to anthropomorphizing AI and developing unhealthy relationships with it, teenagers' brains are not yet fully developed and they can be particularly vulnerable. Last year, research from a watchdog group found ChatGPT would tell 13-year-olds how to get drunk and high, instruct them on how to conceal eating disorders, and even compose a heartbreaking suicide letter to their parents if asked. In interactions with researchers posing as vulnerable teens, ChatGPT typically warned against risky activity, but went on to deliver startlingly detailed and personalized plans for drug use, calorie-restricted diets, or self-injury. In the U.S., more than 70% of teens are turning to AI chatbots for companionship, and half use AI companions regularly, according to a 2025 study from Common Sense Media, a group that studies and advocates for using digital media sensibly. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman has said the company is trying to study emotional over-reliance on the technology, describing it last year as a really common thing with young people. For users of ChatGPT for teens, the chatbot is prevented from suggesting it has personal feelings toward the user or implying it is conscious or experiences emotions, according to OpenAI. That's in addition to blocking romantic or sexual chats. Quote, "We went through and identified what are the hypothetical cues that a model could give that might make a teenager kind of develop a relationship to it," said Allison Mishkin, head of child development at OpenAI. OpenAI doesn't verify users' ages, but it already uses age assurance to estimate if someone is under 18 based on factors such as their types of queries. If someone is identified or identifies themselves as a minor, they are automatically placed into the teen version of the chatbot. This is similar to Meta's approach to teen accounts on Instagram, which have stricter content, chat, and privacy restrictions than regular accounts. To use parental controls, both the teen user and their parent or guardian have to opt in. But O'Leary said the idea with the teen chatbot is to, quote, "make sure that this is safe, even if you don't use parental controls," end of quote. Parents with linked teen accounts can set quiet hours when their teen can't access ChatGPT and receive safety notifications in limited high-risk situations, such as the possibility of a user hurting themselves. For homework help, OpenAI said the teen chatbot is designed not to give easy answers, but to guide students to come up with the answers on their own. The company already offers a version of ChatGPT for teachers. We continue to also invest in expanding interactive learning because research shows that people learn more effectively when they actively engage and struggle with concepts, Mishkin said. End of article. In our next business article, Alberta Commission says no to data centers power plant. Project would be too close to surrounding community. Regulators rules. Article is by Lauren Krugel. The Alberta Utilities Commission has denied an application to build a natural gas plant that would have powered a massive data center complex in the small agricultural town of Olds, Alta. Synapse Real Estate Corp had proposed a 10-building campus with 1.4 gigawatts of power generation, about enough to power the city of Edmonton. The plan also included 1.8 gigawatts of emergency and backup diesel generation. But the commission, in a decision published Monday, said the site won't work. Quote, the project is too close to the surrounding community, and Synapse failed to demonstrate any compelling justification for selecting that location, the commission said. Quote, the site is simply not suitable for the proposed development, end of quote. Data centers house the computer servers and other hardware needed to power a variety of tech applications. With the advent of artificial intelligence, the required processing power has grown drastically, and with it, their thirst for electricity. Many residents in the town of 10,000 voiced fervent opposition to the project within town limits. They were concerned about noise, pollution, home values, safety, and strain on local health care and emergency services. Olds is 80 kilometers north of Calgary. Town resident Carol Edwards said she was overjoyed when she read the commission's decision. Quote, there is no way they should have been placing a 1.4 gigawatt power plant right inside the boundaries of a small heritage town. It's blasphemy. It's monstrous, she said. The commission noted strong local interest. It said it had received applications from about 1,500 parties wanting to participate in hearings. It granted standing to more than 900. Typical proceedings would attract a few hundred applications. The commission said in its decision the project site boundary was about 30 meters from the edge of the first row of properties across a residential road and was also near shops, restaurants, and hotels. Synapse had said there were more than 700 residences within 800 meters of the site. Edwards said she had directly told Synapse CEO Jason Van Gaal the location was all wrong. Quote, this guy was told multiple times, move it 5 kilometers outside of town, and you will see that the resistance disappears, Edwards said. Van Gaal did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The Alberta government has been courting big tech companies to set up shop in the province, but is prioritizing projects that provide their own power for their data centers in order to not overburden the grid. The Office of Alberta's Utilities Minister said the province studied the experiences of other jurisdictions that rush data center projects without the right safeguards. While our government does not weigh in on decisions issued by the Alberta Utilities Commission, decisions like this prove that our framework is working and our regulatory bodies are doing their job to protect the interests of Albertans and our communities, a spokesperson for RJ Sagerton said in an emailed statement. The Commission is tasked with determining whether the accompanying power infrastructure is in the public interest, but decisions around zoning and land use for data centers fall to municipalities. End of article. And you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wednesday, August 19th issue of the Toronto Star. And your reader today has been myself, Dan Arth, and I thank you very much for listening.